Good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name is Sabir, and I run events here at the Strand. Before we launch into a discussion of Yrsa Daley-Ward's new book, The How, I'd like to share a little bit of history about the Strand. The Strand was founded in 1927 by Benjamin Bass over on 4th Avenue's Book Row. Stretching from Union Square to Astor Place, Book Row gradually dwindled from 48 bookstores until, after over 94 years, the Strand is the sole survivor, now run by Nancy Bass Wyden. We want to thank all of you for your support. Without our loyal community of book lovers and the time of authors like Yrsa and Rachel, we wouldn't be here today, and we are so truly appreciative of all of you. We also want to thank our co-presenter for tonight's event, Elizabeth's Bookshop and Writing Center. Elizabeth's Bookshop and Writing Center is an innovative literary center designed to amplify and celebrate marginalized voices. Their catalog highlights, promotes, amplifies, celebrates, and honors the work of writers who are often excluded from traditional cultural, social, and academic canons. Through curated collections of own voices, narratives, Elizabeth seeks to educate and reshape the lens of the reader. And seeks to educate and reshape the lens of readers, how they see themselves and how they view the world. A percentage of all sales from Elizabeth's will go to the Loveland Foundation to support their mission of making mental health care accessible for Black women and girls. You can follow them on Instagram at Elizabeth's of Akron. Tonight, we are thrilled to have with us Yrsa Daley-Ward for the launch of her new book, The How, Notes on the Great Work of Meeting Yourself. Yrsa Daley-Ward is a writer and poet of mixed Jamaican and Nigerian heritage and is the author of Bone and the Terrible, the winner of the Penn Ackerley Prize. She splits her time between Brooklyn and London. Joining Yrsa in conversation tonight is Rachel Cargle. Rachel Cargle is an Akron, Ohio-born public academic, writer, and philanthropic innovator. Her upcoming book with the Dial Press, Penguin Random House, I Don't Want Your Love and Light, examines the intersection of race, feminism, and womanhood, and how we are in relationship with ourselves and one another. Rachel is the founder and president of the Loveland Foundation, her nonprofit offering free therapy to Black women and girls. Rachel recently launched The Great Unlearn, a self-paced, self-priced community utilizing Rachel's monthly curated social syllabi. As a gift to her younger self, Rachel created Elizabeth's Bookshop and Writing Center, currently an online independent bookstore and innovative literary center. Rachel has been featured on TEDx and Red Table Talk, is a regular contributor to Harper's Bazaar, and has been featured in the Washington Post, Essence Magazine, Refinery 29, Forbes, and the New Yorker Magazine. And so, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Yrsa and Rachel to the stage.
Thank you, Sabir. Hi, Yrsa.
Hi.
I'm so excited to be able to talk to you, not just simply for the sake of being in conversation with a brilliant writer about, like yourself, but specifically about your newest book, The How. And out of all of the ways that I like to read and engage with authors, I think that engaging with the content of this new book is one of the most special things that I've been able to do in a really long time.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
I'm Yes, yes, yes. I'm excited to celebrate you in this conversation. I'm excited to learn more about you as a woman, more about you as an author, and more about the ways that you see this book existing in the world. I hope that everyone who is here in the audience recognizes the chat space as a community conversation. I hope you all can join me in questions to ask, and you can join each other in exploring the themes that this book is bringing up. So I'll just dive right in with my first kind of question around this. Well, first of all, I want to say that I'm currently in Jamaica. Hearing that you are Jamaican Haitian,
Oh
I'm
my God.
excited to be channeling some of Kingston around me. My background is a visual of the Elizabeth Bookshop, but yeah, I'm excited to be in Kingston and to know that Jamaica is part of you as well.
Jamaica is a huge part of me. That gave me so much joy. I haven't been back to Jamaica for about 3 years, so
Wow.
enjoy
Okay.
it for me, Rachel. Enjoy it for me.
Well, I'll put all of your energy throughout the island while I'm here. So I kind of want to first talk about how this is your third book. You're officially a seasoned author. You're out here putting out your words and your heart and your content. How does it feel to have a third go around at putting your work out into the world?
You know, one thing that I wasn't prepared for is that it's so different every time. You sort of think, oh my God, I know how to do this now. And every single experience of putting a book out there or putting anything out there is totally different and
Yeah.
surprising, just how it makes you feel.
Mhm.
The things that you come up against and the things you come through.
Mhm.
It's, yeah, I love it. It keeps me on my toes.
Good. And I love that you love the process. And I think that your love for the process might have poured into your approach to this book. This book is
Oh,
different from anything you've ever written. This book is different from the approach people might take to writing about the topic at hand. I wonder, how did you get to writing this particular book? Was it something that was an idea in your head before anything else came out and it just had its chance now? Where did this come from and how did you get to the point to say the how is the book that's going to be what shows up for me next?
they're all, you know, they're all surprises, and I had no idea. I didn't know what this was going to be actually, and it kept shape shifting, and it was actually some of it was, am I going to have a book? Because I didn't know. I knew there were some things coming through, and it was the pandemic, and that was such a strange time, and I
Yeah.
didn't know what was coming out of me, and I didn't know how it would come out or if it would come out.
Yeah.
and and then this, I guess this was the result. I tried to be as honest as possible and sort of write to myself that
Hmm.
guys, and that's what I did. I sort of wrote what I wanted to, probably what I wanted to hear at the time.
It feels like that. It feels like you were coming in with a particular intention and a particular devotion to grappling with the things we all were grappling with in the midst of the pandemic, in the midst of perhaps the thinking, in my experience here in America, the election, dealing with a lot of the collective strains of existing. And your book speaks to our collective experience, our collective approach to understanding ourselves, to learning ourselves, to being honest and truthful. Looking at the book, one of the things that really struck me, and I'm excited to kind of move into the content of the book. One of the things that really made me sit back and think, both this is true, this is real, and this is a shared experience, is, I'm not going to quote it, I'd have to go back into the book, but you talked about the ways that when you started to do the work of engaging with yourself, the work of perhaps studying yourself, combing through the parts of you. You talked about how sometimes the depression felt more real than the gratitude. The depression
Yeah.
felt more real than the possibility. Can you talk about how you were able to infuse these really hard aspects of humanity and write about them? Writing is hard in itself. Writing is
Yeah.
hard alone. So
Yeah.
to write about things so vulnerable, I'm interested to hear how you dove into that with this book.
As I was saying, it's like it was because the pandemic just forced. I had to just sit there in my place in Brooklyn and just get to know myself in some very uncomfortable ways. And the only person that was standing there was me. It was just me in the mirror, and things like gratitude and the idea of depression being sort of more real to me. I feel like when you're having a difficult moment and somebody tells you to use gratitude, it's like the most annoying thing to hear, because you want to sort of sit in it a little. You want to let it, you want to soothe yourself, and sometimes we try to soothe ourselves by staying in it. And the idea of gratitude, it always makes me mad.
Mhm.
But it's the one thing that always helps as well, which is just the strangest sort of circuit. And so I had no choice really but to write about that, because it's the thing that I'm confronted with again and again. Okay, so this difficult situation is here. How am I going to navigate? Do I sit here and become it even more, or do I try and do something else and feel something else? And so it's become a way of life. And so I just wanted to share it.
With those details, knowing that you were sitting with yourself and working through this book gives a lot of tangible options for people to explore these things themselves. A lot of questions you're asking, a lot of lists you suggest people make, a lot of conversations you suggest people have with themselves. Where did those come from? Where are you sharing your own tools that you kind of created and tinkered with yourself? Was this through maybe your own approach to therapy, your own approach to journaling? Where did these tools come from that you laid out so wonderfully in the book?
I think that these are tried and tested methods. These are things that I find, then do, then feel better, then forget, then don't do them for a while, and then when everything's not great, I remember to do them again, and then wonder why I forgot in the first place. So they're things that I've come to again and again and again and again. Just questions, just prompts. And a lot of them are things that people may have done before, but just having them in one place sometimes, I think one of my favorite things to do when I read anything like this is to be reminded of what I already know, because there are so many things, just so many distractions, and so much that helps you forget. So it's just a kind of an invitation back to the self, I think.
You know, this makes me think. I'm not sure what shelf this book sits on, what you demanded, or what the expectations are. But a book like this could easily fit into the continuum in the conversation of quote unquote self help. And one of the things that I love about this book, and you to speak to what you said, is that a huge lesson that kind of broke me open in my youth was that whenever I'm seeking for advice, I have to really consider whether I'm looking for advice or I'm looking for confirmation of what I've already decided. And so, you saying in this book that you really are giving possible tools that people have already used, that's so true, not only in the actual activities or tools that you give them to say, here's how you can explore this. But this book really acts as a mirror for people to say, what is she experiencing? What is she expressing? And how does that align with my truth or what I understand to be the truth? One of the things in reading it that really moved me, and I'd love to hear more about you exploring this topic and maybe talk through for people who haven't read the book yet and are interested what types of things they would get from reading this book, is the reality that we experience life in cycles, that there's these circles of life, not only in the life and death cycle, but also in the learning cycle, in the coming to ourselves cycle, in the understanding our place in the world cycle. And you kind of mentioned it in your the last time you spoke, where you said there's this cadence of remember, forget, repeat, remember, forget, repeat. Can you talk a little bit about that here? And just because I think out of all the things I'd love to kind of bring to the forefront in this conversation for the readers, I'd love to kind of hear you talk through this and give us a peek into what's inside the book.
Absolutely. Right. Well, I feel as though it's so easy to be down on oneself for forgetting that something works, for forgetting that something doesn't work, for forgetting that you need certain things, for forgetting about people, about what makes you tick, what excites you, and forgetting the way you want to be treated, the way that you're not going to allow somebody to treat you anymore. All of those things we forget because, as I said, there are so many other things working away at us. We have social media, we have adverts, we have warnings, we have constant sales. All of these things, we have wonderful streaming services on TV. All of these things, though, that act as distractions. And while I don't want to vilify those things, and I think there's so much space for all of those things, it's great that we have these full lives, but it's so easy to slip away from the inner voice, you know, from source, from this thing that knows who we are and looks after us the best. Yeah. So what's in the book? The book is a series of meditations that sort of hopefully bring the reader back into themselves again and again and again. And it's okay to go away and come back and go away and come back. I mean, who's consistent? We're not robots. It's perfectly normal. Each time that we go away and come back, we're slightly different anyway. We're going away we're dropping things off at the door. We're bringing new things. You know, we're open in different ways. We're cracked open in different ways. The thing that didn't work out has somehow manifested and become something else, become something that was actually useful. I mean, there's a reason why you went down the road and saw something you didn't like. And even if it's just showing you what you don't want, there's a reason for all of it. So it is a book that kind of reminds you of what you already know, and has some more ideas in there as well. And, you know, maybe we challenge the way that we look at something or the way that we talk about something. You can have the same experience 2 times and experience it completely different depending on what you're focusing on. So it's all of those things. I hope I've answered the question, but it's all of those. It's all of those things. It's a series of, I guess, prompts, meditations, and notes on finding yourself again and again.
I love the reality of it being a series of meditations, something you can go away from, come back to, and the grace that you give the reader to say, this is going to be hard, this is why it's hard, and here are some solutions to get through it. You really take us through a cycle of recognizing our shared human experience, as well as the responsibility we have to do the work around what we're experiencing and how we relate to each other. And I think sometimes we miss out on the opportunity to braid those two, to see how the work not just benefits us, but it benefits how we're able to show up and be in community with all the people we care about, and even people we don't care about, the ripple effect of our shared space, our shared humanity. Writing a book like this could not have been easy, for the sake that the only way you could possibly write about these things is that you too grappled with yourself. You too asked yourself these questions. You too had to go away and come back and go away and come back. And so I'm interested to know what did you learn about yourself in writing this? What discoveries did you make in writing this book and exploring it, and what type of vulnerability and work did you put into not only writing it but really working through what you put into the text?
I definitely came across new things. I mean, all my books so far have been semi-autobiographical or completely autobiographical, but this was in a different way. It addresses the reader mostly. I speak about myself. I have some of my experiences in there as well. But it was interesting coming up against the inner critic in a way that it hasn't been there with my other work. Simply because my other work, I feel it and then it goes onto the page, and there isn't actually that much else that goes on. It's like it comes up and through. But in this one, I remember thinking, well, these are sort of letters to either the self or the reader, same thing. And I remember thinking, oh, I'm saying these things that maybe are really obvious or we already know. And then I had to say to myself, well, you don't already know it because you keep forgetting it. So it's one of those things where I did come up against myself in sort of wondering about the forgetting and realizing as well. One thing I realized is that we're all going through the same things. I think I've said it before, but the more and more I sat in lockdown and listened to all of these how-to guides, and that was where the how comes from. All of these how-to guides, how to be better, how to be a different shape, how to be healthier, how to be richer, all of these things. It just creates so much noise. And I thought, what's the antidote to the noise? That's going back to center. And so, yeah, I learned that the noise is really stressful. And at a time when everyone was just so plugged into computer screens because we had to be, because that's all we had, it was quite unbearable a lot of the time. And that helped me with the book as well, because I was experiencing such fatigue with everything as I was writing. Yeah, I don't think I've written anything so slowly before.
That's so interesting. I love the fact that you said the how comes from the onslaught of how-tos and how we're supposed to exist in the world, how we're supposed to be, how we're supposed to learn, how we're supposed to grow. There were so many memes going around during the initial phases of lockdown about what we were doing. People baking bread, people doing particular crafts, people doing these particular workouts, and how we all maybe found a million other things to learn to do except for exist with ourselves in the way that a pandemic like this was forcing us to. We were really engaged, especially even just the visual of it. Like you said, we were fatigued from these Zoom calls, and never in our lives have we had to look at ourselves this much on a screen. When we're going through the workday outside of this pandemic experience, we wake up, look in the mirror, maybe to put our makeup on, maybe to see if what we have on as well. We might see our reflection in the window of a store. We might see our reflection in the bathroom during a break. But in these times, we are looking at ourselves on Zoom screens all day. We might have seen ourselves more since the pandemic started than we ever have. And your book really offers a text basis of this exploration, this reflection of ourselves, grappling and coming up against the reality that we are continuously looking at ourselves more than ever, yet more distracted than ever, trying to get away from ourselves in ways that we didn't have to before, but in ways that are like coming up as deep truths. I am interested to know, because a lot of vulnerability that you show in this book directly relates to fears, directly relates. One of the things when you're talking about depression and how sometimes when we're going through hard times, we want to stay in it. I have a really good friend of mine who oftentimes when his daughter is going through a depression, he tells her, you can be there, but don't put up curtains, as in, feel it, but don't build the furniture to let it be known that you're going to live there. Don't start bringing in the comforts that make you want to stay there and make that be your truth. I wanted to know what the conversation of fear, or how the conversation of fear plays into the themes that you approached in this book.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, we see fear manifest in so many ways. Things that, when people that we don't even recognize as fearful, because we have our own stuff, and then somebody might behave a certain way towards you, and you think, oh, this person's unkind, or this person's rude, or this person's words that I won't say right now on screen, but we respond, we react. And really, in some of the worst arguments, all it is really, if you were to look at it, is we're just exchanging fear, like backwards and forwards. And yeah, I think in the book I say fear is not the enemy. It's simply a marker of what we believe to be true. We come to so many situations just full of fear, and it really does, it alters behavior. It makes you act outside of yourself sometimes. It you put a lot of blocks up with fear, and that can be fear of anything. It could be fear of saying no, anything from fear of saying no to fear of somebody of being left behind, fear that your friends are going to do better than you, fear you'll never find a partner, fear when you are in that relationship that something will happen, and it's not an enemy, but it can be really destructive.
Mhm.
And there's something about sort of meeting, not feeling the fear, but meeting the fear with that vulnerability where we can share. So you can tell me what your fear is in this conversation, and I can tell you what mine is, and we see each other clearly then. But it really does, the idea of fear, I could name so many times when fear has just masked the entire conversation. So in the end, you're having a conversation about something completely different, and there's aggression, and there are all of these things. And I find it so interesting in human relationships how we wield our fear, and how we make weapons out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that the book both explores these themes, but also gives the reader a chance to like breathe and pause and say, okay, how does this apply to me? How is this my truth? How can I figure out where this fits inside my truth? And it's really such an opportunity to reflect. I am interested to know what works of art or literature might have influenced how you wrote this, how you approach the conversation. I often talk about my literary ancestors, even though I am not a direct descendant of them. Their work directly impacts how I write, how I find my voice, how I engage with my audience. What players were present in you approaching this work?
I have to say, it's strange because it's not direct, and maybe it can't be seen. It just happens in my head. It's like a chain reaction. So when I read Claudia Rankin, or I read Toni Morrison, or I read Alice Walker, or Naira Waheed, or when I read these people, it sets off a chain of events inside me. The way that they use language, the way that they talk about things that people that we don't talk about, the way the subjects are broached. Jeanette Winterson, writers that turn things on their heads and make you excited about the work. But not only writers, filmmakers. I get really inspired by the way that color is used on screen, the way that shots look. I get really inspired by going to art galleries and, Lena Victor, and seeing gold leaf, and that all makes such a difference in my writing, like especially texture and color and the way things look. I like to write. I like to make sure that my books are formatted a certain way. I like blocks of text. I like white negative space. Those things matter to me. The way that lines are broken up, and maybe I always think as well when I write that if I did it the next day, I'd break the lines up differently, which is hell for my editor, because I'm always moving things after the deadline. But it's just it's a feeling. It's a feeling, but it's those writers that came before that make me able to do this, that give me the confidence to do that, because I know that they took risks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That risk and that vulnerability is the ingredients for the type of connection. Like you said, when you read their work and they flip things on their head, it's never a easy or instinctual thing to come up with these with such vulnerability. So I appreciate the list of people. I hope everyone here took notes of other writers and works of art that they could reach to in the same way that you did. I just want to let the audience know that we're going to move into Q&A very soon. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm excited to hear all the questions that you have for Yrsa to continue this conversation. But the last question that I'm going to ask for you, that's coming from my own dive into the book and interest in you individually is about like what um I guess it's more around with a book this vulnerable and with a book this direct, with a direct expectation for people to show up in the
Mm.
book, for people to say, not just read it, to engage with it and to engage with themselves. Um, what part of you showed up in this book that hasn't showed up, that hasn't shown up in your previous books? Like what news are we
Ah,
getting?
that is a great question. That's such a good question. Oh, I'm gonna say it, but it's oh God. What is it? Writing autobiographical memoirs and stuff like that. People think, I mean, quite rightly, it requires excavation, and it requires talking about things that you never thought you would tell anybody, and it requires a bravery in a sense, right? Because you're talking about your deepest things, your deepest insecurities and fears and all of that, and also the things that you've done in your life, the wild and wonderful things. But writing a book like The How, I didn't realize it requires just as much of you,
Mhm.
because you're putting yourself also in a vulnerable state when you talk about things that work for you. Because I didn't write the book as somebody who is an expert on anything or who knows anything more than anybody else. And I find that quite vulnerable. I'm just there like offering, okay, this worked for me. And actually, that's also kind of scary in a way. I didn't think it would be. And I guess I'm more used to doing the other kind of work. So it's been an experience, and then one I'm glad that I've had, but I think it surprised me.
I'm so happy to know that your expectation of vulnerability for your readers was not beyond your expectation of you too, that you were willing to show up and kind of do that hard exploration as well. And I really love to know that the readers who are going to be going through this book and wiggling and squirming and being like, why on earth is she asking me these questions? Why on earth is she making me confront things? There's kind of this settling and knowing that you too went through the process to be vulnerable and to, like you said, flip things on their head. These conversations that these how to's, where the how to should really be towards us and not just towards how to get through the moment or how to distract ourselves, the how of understanding and getting to know ourselves. And that's such a special journey that I'm happy to have your ongoing instruction in with this book. And I think it shows in your dedication to the work and how you showed up that you've done this as well. Sabir, if you want to join us and help walk us through Q&A, I'm so excited to hear what questions the audience has.
Fantastic. So thank you both so much for such an interesting conversation before we transition. But on to the transition. Our first question is from Jana, who asks, what risks did Yrsa not expect in writing this particular work?
What risk did I not expect? I think that, again, I didn't expect um, the vulnerability of sharing something. I guess sharing fears. It's easy to talk about fears that you've already had or something you've already gone through, but the idea of talking about something that you continually up against, yeah, I think it's liberating, because it's like now it's out there. But it did force me to look at myself time and time again and say, well, I can't write it if I'm not doing it. So what does this feel like to actually do? And a lot of what's in there, even some of the more simple prompts, when you start doing them and you sit down, you're like, oh my God, yeah, this is do I have to do this work?
All right. And then our next question is from Sarah, who asks, do you have any plans for a fourth book? I love the how so much.
Yes, I do. I've got plans for fourth and fifth. Yeah, I do. I do. And I think we're in different headspaces all the time. I never ever thought I didn't think I had a book like The How in me. I thought I was going to go on to write a fiction novel, something like that. And it just, I just like let it come out. What's there, let it come out. Yeah.
Well, that actually transitions nicely to a question from Facebook from Rabia, who asks, was it difficult to leave poetry behind? Are there other genres you want to work in? Any chance of a novel?
Much chance of a novel, I think. And I'll never leave poetry behind, because the thing about poetry is it shows up in everything that you do. It shows up in everything that you do. So if you write the novel, it's poetic. If you write if you write a list, it's poetic. If you love poetry, so it'll never be left behind. But every book is going to be different, and that might mean genre shifting, because that's just what it seems to be what I do. I don't mean to, but it just I seem to want to change, and I'm like that as a person as well. I'm always different, and I like to flow. So yes, yes to that.
And then our next question is from Belle, who asks, how do you balance social media and writing? Do you feel like the two are in dialogue with each other? And I'd be curious to hear your answer to this too, Rachel.
You want to go first, Rachel?
Yeah, I know you've been out here working answering questions. I'm happy to go first. I think that social media, I always say that I feel very lucky that I get to exist as a writer in this particular time, because social media acts as such a vehicle for ideas, a vehicle for community, and sometimes in some of my spaces where I just cannot get onto the page what I want to say, whether it's when I'm writing my book or when I'm just trying to be creative in myself, I see my captions as a form of writing that I can feel like I've put something out into the world, even if it hasn't been in the traditional sense of being published or being put out in a blog per se, or another way that people perceive a space that writing should live. So my writing and my relationship to social media are absolutely in dialogue, because oftentimes social media acts as an on-ramp to ideas that will come bigger as an essay, or that will come bigger as an article. And when people get the chance to read my book, you'll recognize that the conversations that I have on social media were such a great opportunity for me to explore ideas before I got them into a bigger phase, and explore them, workshop them, see how they relate to the community that I was building. So I feel so lucky that in this particular time I get to exist as a writer with social media, because I think it adds it could be a brand new tool for fleshing out ideas. It's a brand new tool for sharing or workshopping through ideas or concepts with community. And there's also the struggle of being like, get off of social media and get into your writing on a particular project, or get into your writing for a deadline. But I think overall social media has had a positive impact on my writing, much more than it's negatively affected me.
Rachel, I love the way you use the social media. I love the way it's very inspiring, because I really do I see like so much of what you do, like the mood boards, and just like I love seeing like pictures of you when you're moving, and the story, it's storytelling, right? And I think, oh God, it's so these like accounts like yours are the reason I'm still on Instagram, because it's such a hub for community, and anywhere where you've got people, you've got inspiration. So yes, they actually are absolutely are in dialogue. One thing begets another, and as you said, it's about time management. So if you know that for me, morning time, writing time, so it's not good for me. Obviously, I'm not going to wake up and get on my phone. Then no, my writing time would be sort of a bit polluted by that. But there's many hours in a day. So I do think they can all, I think social media is very powerful and sticky. But if you have your boundaries, you have your parameters, you have your times when you're on and off, God, the two can absolutely sort of feed into each other and be wonderful. And it's why I've met so many friends and other people that write, and people that are not friends yet, but I just admire their writing. So I think it's wonderful. And I think, and just from a business point of view as well, it's excellent. I mean, that's where you build your community, your readership. Yeah.
I just wanted to add in that it's something that I always talk about how Instagram and social media is not the work, it's a tool for us to complete our work, whether that work is building community, whether that work is our activism, whether that work is getting ourselves inspired to write. I think sometimes people conflate Instagram and social media. I say Instagram because that's a platform I'm mostly on, but thinking about social media as the thing. And I think it's so important for us creatives and for individuals to remember social media is not the thing. It's not the work. It's not the how. It's the tool that we use to help move us. It's the tool to bring community, the tool to bring inspiration, the tool to bring these on-ramps to other things. So I'm glad that question was asked because it relates to all of us, the people who found this event through social media, the people who use social media for finding ways to do their writing, ways to do their work, ways to find community. So
our next question is from an anonymous attendee who says, curious to hear how you both protect and honor your particular flow and voice in the midst of all the noise. Is there anything about the noise that's been beneficial for you both in terms of your writing?
I think so. Again, you have to know your limits, and if you don't know them straight away, fine. You get that through experience. So if you know your head hurts after 3 hours, not even on the phone, but just absorbing information, then you do less than that. And yes, I think even the noise in a way informs the work. It takes one conversation sometimes, or one YouTube video, or something that might have been disruptive or annoying in the moment it could be a plot line. Inspiration is everywhere, work is everywhere, characters are everywhere, dialogue is everywhere, poetry is everywhere. So how do I honor myself? Wake up in the morning, go on a long morning walk. Have to do that. Come home, meditate, and then the writing starts. So even if I don't get to do that because I've got to go and do something else, or there's something really pressing, I have to have that quiet time, and I have to come into myself regularly. And it won't do for me to go straight into something like social media, or straight into watching lots of TV. That's just not the way that me as an artist. I'm a quiet person, so I like things to be very still and quiet, and my house is super quiet, and I go on all these long quiet walks. I love that. But different people have different things, but I certainly honor myself by in the stillness. And then when the noise comes, it's fine, because I have enough energy, I have enough space, so that then I'm ready for it. And then that mixes with the still calmness that I hope I have, and then we get the dialogue, and then we make the work.
In direct relation to that, one, for the person who asked the question, I think reading Yrsa's book will give you so much direction in how to discover how to be in relation with yourself and understand yourself moving through these things. But in terms of honoring myself, I think one of the biggest things that has shown up so clearly in my public facing work is that I honor myself by allowing myself to shapeshift into whatever I happen to be in a moment. A lot of people came to my work when I was doing heavy anti-racism work online. Now my anti-racism work it has shapeshifted into the way my bookstores run. It has shapeshifted into the philanthropic work that I do. It has shapeshifted into the way that I do my lectures or do my keynotes. And a lot of times we have this fear in the noise of how we have to show up, especially in a world of cancel culture where we're scared that anything we say could make a person feel away and could ruin one thing or another. I have been intentional in honoring myself by letting myself be whatever I am in a moment. You know, a lot of my posts right now are talking about ease, are talking about the things that I'm doing to be true to my younger self, the things that I'm doing in preparation to honor my older self. And though those things don't directly relate to some of the work that I am typically known for, I honor myself by not having fear of being whoever I am in the moment and letting that shapeshift, letting that change, letting that be my truth, regardless of what people's expectations are. And sometimes the noise, I think about it like the white space. Sometimes if we don't know who we are, we could at least be focused on who we know we're not, who we don't want to be. And so in those moments where the noise feels like we feel overwhelmed by having to define who we are, I can take a moment and say, I can at least honor who I'm not. I'm not going to be a person who bends to the will of a collective that hasn't the virtue or the conscience or the ethics that I intend to show up in the world with. I can decide who I'm not going to be in spaces of, you know, constantly feeling jealous, maybe getting off of social media if I am starting to feel ways about how I'm showing up in the world. So it's not always about what we know. Sometimes the noise allows us to have clarity on like, wait, I definitely am aware of what I'm not, and I can lean into having that type of definition as well. So the noise can be helpful, even though it's not giving us what we want, it can show us what we don't want. And I think that is just as important a tenet of understanding and defining ourselves as knowing who we are and what we do want.
And our next question is from Milana, who asks, how do you face the fear that if you do the great work of meeting yourself and really embrace that you might inevitably experience an unbearable weight of loneliness?
I have this loneliness. Loneliness is a whole section actually in the book on loneliness. But I have this feeling that the more you're in connection, the more you're in deep connection, whether that's with yourself or another, the less lonely you feel. And certainly I think that loneliness is born out of when we feel the lack of something that we either think other people have, that we think we had before. And I really think that when you take that time and you are in step with yourself, that we learn such deep levels of fulfillment. We get such deep levels of fulfillment from anything that we're inspired to do, any inspired action that we take from these new feelings, that things like loneliness are, when they do appear, are less. I really feel like they're lessened when we take that time. And you know, we don't know what's on the other side of the line yet. So when we do this work, we have to remember that new situations and opportunities come to you all the time. That one thing that we know for sure is that there will always be new things on their way that you haven't experienced yet, don't know yet, and may give yourself the chance to experience, because you are trying these new ways, because you are listening to source, to self, to the dreams that you used to have that you've now shut down because of fear, because of the ideas of the lack of something. And so there are so many things within the quotes and within those things that just bring you back to things that you thought you'd forgotten. And I don't think it's as easy to be lonely in all of that, because you're coming back to yourself.
And then our next question is from Ben, who begins, fascinating discussion. Thank you both. I'm interested to hear about bringing autobiography to your work. Is your experience the starting point for your writing, Yrsa?
I think it's got to be, because I'm a human being on this planet having a set of experiences that I'm pretty sure a lot of people have. Even when I want to be dramatic and feel like, I'm the only one and it's so awful and all of these things, or, you know, these feelings are just so intense and nobody else can possibly understand. No, I mean, people understand because we're all having similar experiences. So yeah, it does come from things I felt. It does. I think it would have to. It would have to. And I think even if you write fiction, there is, and you're writing a character who's sort of unlike yourself, we all have this sort of range of emotions, feelings, things we don't want to admit to, secret things, sticky things, unspeakable things. So yeah, I mean, you find your way into everything that you write, I think.
Our next question is from an anonymous who asks, how do you balance compassion towards yourself while thinking about yourself / your actions critically? How do you each strike this balance? Why don't we start with this one with Rachel, and then we'll go to Yrsa.
Yeah, yeah, I'm happy to start with that. I think this really touches back on the the conversation or the question that was asked around doing the work and then having the fear of being lonely after, of recognizing that there's so much about yourself that you have to change, that you might not be recognizable on the other side. And that's one of the things that we have to be in conversation with ourselves about, and it's something that has helped me move through every hard stage of life, is this question of, would I rather exist with the fear and uncertainty, or would I rather exist with kind of the lies and the darkness? And that's because, unfortunately, with society as a whole, under patriarchy, under capitalism, under um, colonialism, there is a security in what is not true and what is not right, or what is not the best for us. And it's so unfortunate that we all have to claw out of this hole in order to see a little bit of sunshine, a little bit of the light that reminds us that what is true for us is the best for us, even if it's hard to get to that truth. And the work, and that's why it's called the work. It's not called like the rest. It's not called, the easy thing. It's called the work because it is labor. It's laborious to move through the things that aren't true about ourselves. And there's a question that I've been asking myself, and I am posing this question to the person who asked that original lonely question, and the person who's asking this one as well, is what if it all goes right? What if you get to the other side, and instead of feeling like you're going to get to another side of loneliness, you actually get into another side of a new community of people who actually see you for who you actually are and not who you've been told to be? We have this human autopilot towards disaster, towards what will go wrong. And it really takes a lot of labor to say, what could go right? What is the possibility? And really charging our minds to say, when we're looking at a problem, instead of saying, what is the problem? Say, what is the possibility? Instead of where will the lonely come? It's where will the community come? Where will the community with myself and others come? And I think that in order for me to give compassion to myself in doing this work, in finding these hard things about who I am in the world, the shadow sides, things I don't like about myself, it's the reminder, as Yrsa tells us, we're all going through it. We're not alone in this experience. And so many good things come when the truth is there and when the truth is available, even though they might be dirty and we have to dust them off, even though they might taste bitter because it's unfamiliar to us. As Yrsa said in the quote that I mentioned, she goes, sometimes the depression felt more real to me than the possibility. The depression felt more real. And we are conditioned to believe that our worst selves might be our truth instead of our best selves. And that's the work. It's the labor of getting to that. And so I appreciate even the inquiry to bring compassion in it, because that's a choice we have to make. It clearly doesn't come natural to us. It's a choice. So if you're feeling a little discouraged by saying, this is way harder, or I don't feel good in my body around this, great. That's exactly where you should be, because if you weren't feeling the strain, if you weren't feeling the friction, then you're not really deep diving as far as you need to go. So those negative feelings, that lack of compassion, should only trigger you to say, this is my opportunity to be intentionally compassionate, because it's not always going to come easily.
I love that. I love that. And I mean, you're going to need the compassion. You're going to need the compassion to navigate this. You're going to need to be gentle with yourself when you you come up against things that you think you already should know, and things that you do in fact already know. We don't, people say when you know better you do better. That's not necessarily true. We do the same things over and over again. We repeat. In terms of being critical, I think being truly compassionate is that's embodied in that, because you will ask yourself questions, you will call yourself to the carpet if you see something that doesn't ring true. And even in my writing of the How, you know, there were moments where I'd go back and rephrase something that I think could be phrased better, because I want to be responsible. I don't just want to throw anything out, as much as I'm a poet, and it is like throwing paint out, and sometimes I don't even see where it settles and I just put a bunch of words together. But there's a different responsibility in writing a book like this in the current climate, because of the past 2 years that we've all had. There is so much going on in our psyches and our bodies that we can't even tell yet, as a result of the past 2 years. And I really do feel it, and I really felt it writing this book, I'll tell you that. So I would say compassion first always, and then the other things should follow. The other things should definitely follow, because it's part of it.
I wanted to add to that one of the tools that I use in finding compassion when we can't find it for ourselves is answering questions as though we are answering. So when you're going through Yrsa's book and some of the questions are really just friction against you, instead of answering the question for yourself, answer it for a friend. Often we can find more compassion for other people than we do for ourselves. So if you're asked the question, how, even in life, how am I going to get through this breakup? How am I going to have compassion for myself to not feel stupid, or to not feel like I'm silly for having fallen in love, or whatever the issue is? Oftentimes I say, dear Molly, dear Katie, dear anyone else other than myself that I can pull the compassion towards. Because oftentimes we can find compassion for other people, and then after you write out all of the ways that you can be loving and answer the question for them, then offer it to yourself. And that's been a major tool in helping me find compassion for myself. I can often find it for others first and then turn it towards me.
Oh, I love that. That's amazing.
Unfortunately, we only have time for one last question. So our final question is from Tanya, who asks, what do you wish for every person that buys your book in the hope of knowing the how in meeting themselves?
If I can only hope one thing, I hope that it stirs in you a memory of the thing that you remember, the voice that was there before all the doubt crept in, and all of the things that urge you to be other than you are, whether it's community, whether it's, I don't know, patriarchy, or your religion, whatever, some idea about your identity that keeps you rigid. So it's an invitation, really. It's an invitation to finding that part of you that gets excited by things and wants to move and wants to be fluid. And I love what Rachel said before. God, I'm so inspired by just showing up as you are in the moment. That's so powerful. As you are in the moment, that's scary, because you think that you have to be so many other things. You don't. And really, that is the key to sort of unlocking all of this, like, I don't even want to say potential, but it's this energy that's there. So yeah, I just hope it is some kind of invitation to the self.
Thank you so much. I feel like if I wouldn't look weird on camera, I would have been taking like crib notes throughout your entire conversation. And I think we see it in the chat too. Thank you to our audience for joining us this evening. If you haven't purchased a book, I have dropped a link in the chat. I've also dropped a link to our co-sponsor for tonight's event, Elizabeth's Bookshop and Writing Center. Please check out their online website. And as a final note, thank you, Yrsa. Thank you, Rachel. It was such a fantastic event and such an honor to have you both.
Thank you. This was lovely. Thanks, Yrsa. Congratulations.
This was amazing. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.